In this video, I'm going to walk through the entire rental arrears process that we use to minimize rental arrears across all the properties we manage. So before we get into the entire process and I explain the diagram, let's look at the rules. First rule is tenant is called any day they are in arrears. That is a non-negotiable. Obviously, some days we do miss the calls here and there, but for 99% of the year, every tenant who is in arrears is called, regardless of whether they are 1 day or 8 days in arrears. They are sent email and text reminders any day they are in arrears as well. The tenant is breached when they are 8 days or more in arrears. This is a non-negotiable. If we try and be nice, if you will, and say, hey, look, just pay tomorrow, or you're already 9 days, but pay on the 10th day, it's going to keep on happening, and they're going to be going further and further in arrears, and it is a disaster waiting to happen. Number 4 for the rules is tenant is issued a notice to leave if a breach is not resolved within 7 days. That is also a non-negotiable. I have had it where tenants are 8 days plus in arrears, and they keep on requesting to not be issued with a notice to leave another day. We don't listen to any of that. We hit them with a notice to leave as soon as we can, and funnily enough, it was all paid that same day. Some tenants will try and be very difficult and call your bluff, so it's important to have a set of rules that you do not break, so every tenant knows that if they don't pay rent, they're not going to be living in the property. So let's look at the diagram. First step, tenant is not in arrears. That's great. We have no issues, and tenants don't hear from us. When a tenant is 1 to 3 days in arrears, every single day, the tenant is called, and the conversation that we had on the phone is documented in our system. Now, sometimes we can't get a hold of them. We still put it in our system that we called them and left a message. We always leave a voicemail. In case they don't look at their voicemails or take phone calls during the day, they're also sent an email and a text message, meaning that tenant will 100% know that they are in arrears, because there are 3 touch points per day. That happens from day 1 to day 3. And sometimes the tenant's recurring payment may not work, or they transferred it to the wrong account, they put the wrong reference number. Stuff happens, and I get it. And those tenants, if we call them on the same day, if they're on 1 day in arrears, they'll realize that mistake and fix it up. Because 80% of the time, the tenants aren't being malicious, it's just a mistake. But for the other 20%, this is where all the work begins. When the tenant is from 4 to 7 days in arrears, by now there is no doubt that they know they're in arrears. Still, every day the tenant is called, we leave a voicemail if they don't answer. They also send a text message and email. On the phone, and the entire text that is in the emails and messages, the tone changes, because in 1 to 3 days, the tenants aren't being malicious and they just forgot. But when they're 4 to 7 days, it becomes more serious, we become more blunt and straightforward, and they are made aware that if they do not pay, they will be issued a breach on day 8, which heavily affects rental references in the future. And also the ledger. If the property manager sees that a previous tenant's ledger that is wanting to rent through their company is in 8 days arrears at one time, it's a massive red flag. So here, if the tenant is in 4 to 7 days, the owner is updated. Some owners don't want to be bothered with this as well, because many tenants do resolve the arrears in this time frame. So we may update the owner, may not. The next step is if the tenant is 8 days in arrears. This is where it gets frustrating, and we continue to put the pressure on. The owner is updated. By now, they need to know that they may need to expect they may not be receiving rental income on the next disbursement. The tenant is sent a notice to remedy breach. We cannot breach the tenant sooner than them being 8 days in arrears. This provides the tenant 7 days to rectify the breach. They're also sent an email with this breach sent a text message saying we have issued a breach to your email. The tenant is also called, and again, that conversation is documented. When they're breached, tenants that are being difficult tend to pay. So if the tenant cannot pay, because things happen, people lose their jobs, or you have to pay a massive bill, some things unfortunately do happen. But by now, the tenant should have already contacted us with a situation during one of these stages and not right now. So if the tenant cannot pay, we can discuss on who may be able to help them to pay. I've had it where friends chip in, their family, their dad or mother chips in on the rent, and that's great to see. Same as Department of Housing, you can go through the rent subsidy route as well. Then hopefully the tenant pays rent. Then we advise the tenant how to avoid arrears occurring again. The best way to do this is to keep 2 weeks ahead on rent, which isn't a legislative requirement, but it is very good to have. And you can do this over time. You can pay an additional 2 days each week. So by fast forward a month or two, you're ahead by 2 weeks. Back to the framework. Let's say the tenant has been breached and they're not paying rent, they're not returning calls, or if they are, they're saying they're going to pay rent and they still don't pay rent, they don't want anybody to help them. From the 9th day to the 15th day, all we can do is continue to call them and email them and send them a text message. Again, the phone conversation, the email tone, it becomes very, very straightforward and blunt, because by now you're affecting somebody else's investment and the client's ability to pay their mortgage. And to me, that seems very, very disrespectful, and to be behind in 9 to 15 days in arrears is not something I want to see at all. Again, the owner is updated if they do want to be updated during this time. Some owners just want to know that they've been breached and then update them in 7 days if the breach has been resolved or if it hasn't. Let's say the tenant unfortunately has not resolved arrears again. The owner is updated on this because this is a serious matter. The tenant is issued with a notice to leave and provides a tenant 7 days to vacate the premise. This is the shortest time frame we can provide with the current legislation. If we could issue a notice to leave with them to vacate in 3 days, then we 100% would do it. But we do have to give 7 days notice. And this is where things get ugly. I have had some times when a tenant is issued a notice to leave when the housing market is extremely hot. They realize they won't be able to find a rental, and now they want to start paying rent. So sometimes they actually decide to pay rent. But the notice to leave has already been issued, which means we can still proceed with that notice to leave. And in some scenarios, this is the best option. Because if the tenant is not paying rent and is in 16 days arrears, who is to say they won't be in 16 days arrears in 2 weeks' time? Or in 3 months' time? They may go good for a while, but then they'll probably go in arrears again, and it's going to cause more headache. You may as well bite the bullet now, get it sorted, move them out, and get a quality tenant in. So at this stage, we will discuss this with the owner and provide our opinion on what we think is the best route. In some scenarios, the tenant pays rent, the owner agrees to void the notice to leave, which means they are still going to be staying in the property, they're not being kicked out, and we have received full rent. Then it links back into here, the tenant's paid rent, and then we advise them and educate the tenant on how to stop this occurring again. But let's say the tenant has not paid rent still, then they are required to vacate the premise within 7 days. By this time, they most likely are going to simply abandon the property, which is very unfortunate. I have seen it happen. Then the bond and vacate process begins. The bond, of course, will be claimed, but sometimes that bond will not cover everything, so it's important to have landlord insurance in place. And even if the tenant has paid rent after they've been hit with a notice to leave, sometimes it is best to, choose to not void the notice to leave and continue with their vacate. As you can see, there is a lot of touch points, and it is specifically designed like this so that we can mitigate the arrears that occur. So we have 3 touch points every day: a phone call, a text message, and email. And if tenants complain about being messaged and emailed or called, well, then I say, well, pay your rent and this won't happen. And most of the time they end up paying their rent. Let's say the tenant has been in arrears for 16 days in total. That means there have been 48 touch points during that time. So we try and do everything possible to mitigate the arrears and get them to pay their rent. I do find sometimes putting them in touch with Rent Connect. We have a great team at Rent Connect that I sometimes work with. They are great super quickly and can provide rental subsidies for people in need, because sometimes unfortunate things do happen. The key thing to remember is that we have to follow legislation at all steps. We can't breach them and hit them with a notice to leave the day after. We have to give it another 7 days and then give it another 7 days for the tenant to vacate. Again, it is unlikely that the bond will cover all the costs involved for 16 days rent, cleaning, removal of rubbish, any damages that were at the property when we finally get possession of that property. So it is important to have landlord insurance, because yes, we don't want this happening, and we try as much as possible as property managers to stop this from happening. But sometimes, like you're in a car crash, things happen out of nowhere. So it's important to make sure you have a safety net and have landlord insurance, so you can cover your arrears and continue paying the mortgage. And by the time you get to the bond and vacate process, you want to just get everything sorted and get at least again, so you can have money coming in straight away, which means getting a bond cleaned down the same week, getting damages resolved immediately, and advertising the property, showing open homes to get somebody in.